Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be changing out the rotors on the Cadillac CTS coupe. This is in preparation for me changing out the rims on here as well. I'm going with the drill and slotted rotors. Yes, I know they don't add any performance to it, but they look good, especially if you're going with nice rims too that will highlight those rotors, which will look much better looking at those than looking at these through your rims. These look a ton better. So I'm gonna walk you through the process of how to change it out. I'm only gonna do one because the process will be the exact same for all of them. What you're gonna need for this is pretty straightforward. You're gonna be on a bottle of this right here is great because you're gonna lube up everything when you're putting it back together, and this stuff is just the best. You're going to possibly need a C-clamp if you're changing out your pads. You're going to need a 14 millimeter ratchet style is the one I use, a flathead. You're also going to need a 19 millimeter in order to take off the bracket up in there, and of course your ratchet as well. All right, the first thing we're going to want to do is remove the caliper. And the best way to do it first is to try to compress the piston that's inside of here down as much as possible to help relax the brake pads off of your rotors. One of the ways you can do it is just take your screwdriver, stick it up in here. There's a slot over here on the other side, and you can use that, stick it in there. And what you're doing is pressing up against this rotor here. I got it in between one of these lines over up in here. I'm pulling it this way towards me, so it's pushing it back. The pistons are on the back side of this caliper, and so when I'm pulling this down this way, what it's doing is pushing those pistons back inside of the caliper, giving you more room to help take this off. All right, and when you're doing that, when that piston is going back inside of the caliper, it's pushing the fluid through the lines back up into where I showed you, which was the master cylinder. And so if your master cylinder is already kind of full of fluid, it may start to overflow. So you may want to keep an eye on it and may need to siphon a little bit of that fluid out so it doesn't overflow out of there. So now once we got this part done, what we want to do is we want to take our 14 millimeter and put it on here. Let me just check, make sure you guys have a good view back there. All right, and loosen up each one of them. Shouldn't take much. If it does, that means somebody probably over torqued them. All right, and it's just two. All right, two 14 millimeters. There we go, right there. And because once you break them, they should just come out by hand. All right, there's the second one. At that point, sometimes you're able to just grab it and it comes off. If not, you'll just take your flathead and put it in there and use that to help as leverage to work it out of there, either from the top or from the bottom. You know, you see that? So, again, sometimes if you compress the piston back far enough, it may just come right out. And there we go. Those are the pistons I was referring to, if you can see them. The two pistons, and so they're still sticking out some, so we're going to press those back even further because your new brake pads will be thicker than the old ones. So in order to be able to accommodate that extra thickness, you want these pistons to be pushed all the way back in there. So what we'll do is, what you should do to make sure, because you don't want to risk damaging your hose while you're doing other things, you may want to just string this up with a bungee cord or something. So I want to show you that, but for me, I'm just going to set it off to the side up here for now. Now that isn't recommended because if it falls, then it could damage the hose. So now you want to take your brake pads off. and they're in little slots down there. You just slide them out like there. There it is. And then you do one for the other side as well, for the back side. And it should just come right on out. All right, so the next thing we want to do is remove this bracket right here, because we can't remove the rotor because the bracket prevents that from happening. So we're going to take our 19 millimeter, and we're going to, there's 2 bolts back there. Let me give you a view from the rear so you can see. Let's see here, back it up for you a bit. And this one right here, and this one right here. These are the 2 we need to remove right here. And then once this comes off, then we can remove the rotor. Hey, so earlier I said this was a 19 millimeter. I was actually wrong. It was actually an 18 millimeter. So tossing this one away, pulling out the 18 millimeter, putting it on the 2 bolts. And as you can see, not bad to take off. All right, the bolts are the same size, so there's a different one for the top versus the bottom. That's your rotor. That's your brake caliper. There we go, that's your brake caliper bracket. And now at this point, these may come off, or in this case, you have the set screw up in here. It helps keep it in place. I don't put those back on, but this one is up in here, so sometimes I have to drill those out because they've been there so long that they just get seized up. So it takes a star bit, so we'll see whether or not we're going to be drilling that out. So this is it right here. So I say it takes a star bit, and it really is just, the only purpose it serves is to hold this in place until you put your brake calipers on. All right, so this takes a number 30 star bit, and if you don't have one in there, if you don't have that in there, that's fine. It meant somebody probably changed the rotors out previously and just didn't put it back in. What I like to do first is put it in there because these are easy to strip out. So to try to break it free a little bit, I'll put the bit in there, and then I'll whack it a couple of times just to try to break up any corrosion or anything that has built up on the threads. And next, I'll take my ratchet, wherever that may be at, around here. There we go. And then I will first go in the direction of putting it on a little bit, and then I'll try, see if I can. Oh, look at that. It's coming off. Now, and when you do it, you most likely won't be that lucky. But if you have to, you may just have to drill it out. No biggie, just get a couple of drill bits, start off with a smaller one and work your way up until you're in drill bit size until you can get it out of there. And there we go. That's the screw. Now we're going to take the rotor off. You see how that comes off with no issue. That's the old one. Nothing wrong with it, just that I won't drill and slot it. All right, now depending on the condition of your center bore over here, you may need to take a wire brush and clean it up. You know, this one isn't in bad condition, so don't need to really do that. But in the salt belt, you know, it can be quite rusty up in here. And what I like to do as well to make it easier for the next time it needs to come off is I like to go around with a bit of anti-seize. Just put it up in there. And that will just help make sure that it doesn't get too rusted up on there. All right, so now it's time to put the new rotors on. And typically these will come with a sticker on there when you have the drill and slotted ones that says whether it's for the left or the right side. They didn't put these on here for whatever reason, but so you will know is that you see these slots down there, the slotted part, that's the drill, that's the slotted. The slotted needs to be, the front of it needs to be at the lower end, and the top needs to be at the top end. If you see it's going in the opposite direction, that means you're putting it on the wrong side. If they're not drill and slotted, then most likely they're not, it doesn't matter which side, whether it's left or right. And there we go. And if you were wanting to put your set screw back in, you will line up that extra little hole right there with the hole behind here, like so. And if you're going to do it, if you're going to put it back in, my suggestion would be is to take a little anti-seize and put them on those threads before you put it in there. Then put it in there. And then you can screw it down, and then that will help to assure the next time these rotors come off, that set screw actually comes out like it did this time. All right, and now next what we want to do is put back on the bracket. So we're going to take our bracket, but before we put it on, what we want to do is prepare it for the brakes pads. And you see these right here. You see how they move up and down. Those are your guide pins. If they're not moving up and down freely like that, that means they're seized. If it's just stuck, it doesn't turn, it doesn't move in and out like that, it's seized to your caliper. That means you got to your caliper bracket. That means you have to buy a whole new caliper bracket and guide pins, because this has to be able to move as your brake pad wears down. It'll be out further, but as your brake pads wear down, it goes further in and further in. So to help prepare, what we want to do is you want to have a napkin, and you want to have your Permatex brake parts lubricant. This stuff is awesome. So what you want to do is, this is rubber right here. You want to take that off. As you can see, I used it already because it's orange. That's how you know it's the Permatex. And you want to take it, your Permatex. But before you do that, what you want to do is clean off the old gunk. Get it nice and clean. Then you're going to slap on some new stuff. Get it on the end, cover everything up, because you don't want these seizing up in there. And then you're going to take it in. What I do when I'm sticking it in, I just kind of twist it back and forth to get it in. And then once it's down there, now you want to seat this rubber gasket back over it. So push it down and it should lock right in place. So that way moisture won't get in there to dry these out. And you want to do that for both of them. There we go. And your brake pads may or may not have come with new of these. So if you have new ones, just pop it off and then maybe clean that up. Take your wire brush, clean off any buildup. Then set the new ones in and do it for the other side as well. Clean it up. And set your new ones in there. And then to help make sure that your brake pads are able to glide, because the brake pads will set in these little grooves right here, because your rotor will be in the middle right here, and the brake pad on this side, brake pad on that side. So its feet will set in here. So I like to go ahead and throw a little bit in those areas that the feet of the brake pads will be sitting. Now you want to get your bolts. No need to put any thread lock on these or not. And now I'm going to put this down in there, rotate it the right way. Alright, now we can go ahead and tighten it down. Alright, and double check, if you're using drill and slotted rotors, double check to make sure that the front of that slotted is towards the front of the car first and the back end is towards the back. If it's slotted, if it's going that direction, you put it on the wrong side, take it off, put the right one on. And next what we want to do, we're going to want to put the rotor, the brake pads back in here. And remember, these are the feet right here. So you probably imagine these are your new ones. What you want to do is, you got your feet here, we already greased up in there at the bottom part. But I would like to do, as you can see, this represents the front one. And where you see it's not painted, because I painted them while they were on here. But even if it wasn't painted, you'll be able to see where your brake caliper rests on these. It would be those areas there. So since those touched by the caliper and could create areas where it will squeak, I like to put some of this on in those areas there. So as it's pressing against there, it helps prevent any squeaking from happening when you're braking. And you set it down in there. And push it up against there. All right. And you're going to do the same with the back one. The reason I know this is the back one, of course, new ones you wouldn't see that, is that, well, on your back one, you got this right here is your early warning detector. You see that right there? So as you can see, I still got some time left on the backhand, but once it gets low enough where this right here will actually touch the rotor, you will actually start hearing a squeal or a squeak. That's letting you know your brake pads are low and it's time to change them. So I'm going to put some in the two areas where the pistons touched on here, where it touches on here. That way when it's pressed up against there, I don't have to worry about against any squeaking noises. There we go. Get my fingers up. And now the next step would be to put the rotor on. Put the brake caliper on. And remember, you're putting new pads on, they're thicker. So to accommodate that thickness, we need to push the rotor back up in there. All right, the rotor. We need to push the pistons back up in there. See how far they stick out? So remember, we took the cap off of the master cylinder. If your fluid level is pretty high, when we push this back in, it's going to push that fluid level up and possibly overflow it. So be prepared to need to suction some of that out if that's the case. So what I usually just take to do, I just take one of the old brake pads, set it up in here against there as such. Hopefully you guys can see that. Let me take a look. Yeah, let me pull it you guys a little closer. All right, so I just take one of the old brake pads, put it on there. And then I take my C-clamp. This is an old used C-clamp. Don't go out and buy, well, you can buy a new one, they don't cost anything. Open it up high enough, far enough. Put it on there. You see one end on this end, the other end there. So it's going to press this brake pad against the pistons and force them back down in there. All right, hopefully you guys can see that. And remember, keep an eye on your bottle to make sure you don't overflow. All right, so that's it back all the way up in there. Now you can back it off. Take that out. And now you see the piston is nice and flush with there. Put my used one back in there. And now I'm going to take my caliper. Make sure when you do it that you don't twist this, you know, when you're moving around, sometimes you can end up twisting it. Make sure it's not like that. The hose, that is. And you can just set it back on there, and you can push these guide pins in to give the clearance needed to let this drop back down in place. And you take your screws, your bolts, that is, and just bolt them back in. Now I'm gonna get my 14mm and tighten them. Now, I'm not sure if you can see this part or not. Let me see if I can zoom you in. Oh, you're pretty well up in there, but you may not be able to see it. When you're turning the bolt, this part right here may actually turn too as well. So you may need to put a open end on that to hold that while you tighten up your, and sometimes just putting your finger on there is more than enough, because once you get enough grip, it does the rest on its own, like that. All right. All right, so this is how it looks with the 20-inch Camaro Z28 rims on there, and the drill and slotted rotors installed. How you guys like? Hopefully you like. Hit the like button, and please hit the subscribe button as well, so you can see all my other YouTube videos out there working on my Cadillac CTS. Thanks for joining.